if you look at the silver lining of this thing, yeah, I think it's just definitely made me a better person, better doctor.
Welcome to the Strokecast. A Generation X stroke survivor explores rehab, recovery, the frontiers of neuroscience, and how to peel a banana with one hand.
Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to episode 161 of the Strokecast. This episode is sponsored by the fine folks at Modus Nova. To find out if Modus Nova can help you recover the use of a stroke-affected limb, visit strokecast.com/Modus Nova. And by the fine folks at Like-Minded. To find out if Like-Minded can help you live your best post-stroke life, visit strokecast.com/like-minded. We know occupational therapists can have strokes. We talked with Jan Douglas about her experience a couple of years ago. But obviously, doctors and surgeons can have strokes too. And that's what happened to New Mexico urologist, surgeon, painter, and now author, Dr. Bevan Choate, just a year and a half ago. In this conversation, he shares his story, he discusses how he got into art or back into art, and explains just why someone would choose to become a urologist to begin with. So now, let's meet Dr. Choate. Bevan, thank you so much for reaching out and for being on the show this week.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate the opportunity, and I love your podcast.
Oh, thank you very much. Obviously, you're a member of this club now. And what was your life like before your stroke?
You know, I'd been a practicing urologist for, after graduating 4 years of medical school and a 5-year residency in urology. You know, so I was out on my own. You know, I was finally paying down student loans. I felt like, you know, I pretty well had life by the short hairs. I was about 3 years out. All of a sudden had a very catastrophic, life-changing event and had a stroke on the 3rd of December of 2020.
So what happened that day?
You know, it started out like any other day. I was getting up to go to work. You know, I felt kind of groggy and, you know, as we might do, and just took one step out of my bed to, you know, to go do my morning routine and just crashed to the ground like a ton of bricks. The room started spinning, started seeing double of everything. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know exactly what.
That's kind of amazing. I mean, first of all, for that to happen in late 2020, the year that everybody was already convinced this is the worst possible year, starting with fires and the threat of nuclear war with Iran. And in January and February, COVID comes along. Then, of course, the murder hornets pop in briefly and then nope right the heck out. Everything was going to be better by October. And then COVID, of course, got even worse. And then it's like we're in the home stretch. We're like, well, it looks like 2020 is just about over. We got through our presidential election. What could possibly go wrong now? And then December 3rd rolls around and your life just is like, nope.
Yeah. So what's a stroke on top of all of that? But yeah, so, you know, to be honest, I didn't think I was having a stroke. You know, I was 35 years old. You know, I was running 12 miles a week, going to the gym regularly, had no hereditary issues. You know, I might have had like a very slight elevation in my blood pressure for my age, but you know, but nothing really serious. Overall, I was a healthy guy, you know. And so a stroke was definitely not the first thing to come to mind. You know, I said, you know, I'm probably just having some kind of inner ear issue right now. You know, my wife was, at the time, she was, you know, my fiance, but she was next to me and, you know, fairly worried, you know, brought me a large basin to start throwing up into as that was, you know, what followed. She said, we got to get you to the emergency department. And I said, nah, you know, what are they going to say, right? And so, yeah, ultimately, after a lot of stubbornness and testosterone-fueled refusals, I said, okay, fine, let's go to the ER. You know, the vomiting was not remitting at all. So I reluctantly agreed. And so that's where we went next.
As I've heard said many times, doctors make the worst patients.
Exactly. Exactly. I wholeheartedly believe that. And so,
You get to the ER, and how did that triage process go then? Did they recognize what was happening and get you into the scans right away, or was there more delays there?
well, I think the delays were, and mostly due to my stubbornness. I said this is probably an inner ear thing. It kind of made sense with the room sort of spinning, the nausea, the vomiting. The ER doctor kept asking me, "Do you want a CT scan?" I said, "No, no, no." And then finally, after sort of the conservative measures failed, I said, "Sure, I'll accept the CT scan." Lo and behold, there was a large hypodensity in my left cerebellum. And, I'm telling you, if a urologist can read a brain scan, then it's pretty bad.
Yeah. So a hypodensity, what does that word mean?
So basically just an area where it's, I suppose not lighting up as much, just kind of a large, full area in the brain where it's just not getting perfusion, from blood. And so, it was an ischemic stroke. Man, the world just kind of fell out from underneath me when I realized that. I'm just thinking, how is this possible? And so from there, they sent me to pretty much the only hospital in New Mexico that could handle, that level of acute care, namely, stroke care. Mm-hmm. And so that's where they transported me next.
With this going on, it's a wake up. It sounds like it was a wake up stroke. Were you even in a window for TPA or thrombectomy?
I was not, only because we just had no idea when this started. And so that was one of the things. As soon as the stroke was diagnosed, they put me on it was the height of COVID, so they put me on a Zoom call with a neurologist. He said you've had a stroke, and one of the big challenges here is that we have no idea when it started. So things like TPA are pretty well out of the question. And I remember that moment really distinctly. It was, this, I think he was from India, the neurologist. He had this very thick accent, and he asked me what I did for a living. And I said, well, I used to be a urologist. And, he kind of laughed, and he said, no, you still are. Don't worry about it. We'll get this figured out. But yeah, so they sent me over to the university hospital. That's where I had trained. So it was very odd. When I showed up in the trauma bay, I started seeing a bunch of people I knew, people I had trained with, and some new faces as well. Some people were there to kind of, rubberneck a little bit and see what was going on. But, others were just there as friends to kind of see what they could do to help.
I mean, that is certainly a plus there, is that you were able to already go into a very personally supportive and connected environment.
Yeah. And it was, one of my wife's friends is a surgical resident there, and she came down and, kind of tried to talk me off the ledge a little bit. And so, yeah, there was a lot of support. I was fortunate for that, in light of everything going on.
So did they figure out what caused your stroke? What threw that clot into the cerebellum?
Yeah, so it was a left vertebral artery dissection, and so basically the internal lining of my left vertebral artery had sheared, kind of like the inner tube in a bike tire. It basically had torn, and so from that you get a lot of turbulent blood flow, etc., and things that form clots, and then those clots made their way into mostly my left cerebellum.
So do you know what caused that shear? Was there some trauma in the weeks leading up to your stroke, or was it just a thing that happened?
Ultimately it was a thing that happened. No precipitating factors. People talk about trauma as an etiology for that problem. You also hear it's the thing that when chiropractors do neck adjustments, that artery can be sheared. But I found out later that only really happens about 40% of the time, or at least there's a traumatic etiology or source for that, about 40% of the time. So we're talking the majority are just basically unknown. A lot of people ask me if it was COVID related. I don't know how, but I never got COVID, especially while being in the hospital in the ICU. I got a lot of other things, but I did not get COVID. So, it was just completely out of the blue.
Once I started learning more and more about stroke, I began to realize about just how many design flaws there are in the human body, starting with the shoulder, of course, being the worst designed joint in the human body, but also those vertebral arteries that run up through the bones of the neck, which mean they don't have nearly the flex that the carotids, the arteries in the front of the neck, have to withstand sudden movements and things like that.
Right. The timing and everything made sense when I looked at it in hindsight, because I was feeling this, I wouldn't say intense, but just kind of this dull pain in the left side of my neck. I attributed it to, I always have pain in my neck. I'm a surgeon, like I'm always hunched over an operating table or something like that. So, my neck is always relatively sore.
Plus at this point, you were in your 30s, and sleeping wrong when you're in your 30s can sometimes hurt your neck.
Exactly. Yeah. So there was no, it wasn't anything, abnormal leading up to it. But when I read that, the sort of the timing is that a lot of times there will be this kind of like prodrome, or this sensation of a sore neck, maybe, 2 to 4 days before, the event actually occurs. And looking back, I said, oh yeah, I guess I did have that. But yeah, that was the cause. But what caused the dissection? Who knows?
So, I mean, we've talked a little bit about the support and having some friends and familiar faces in the hospital, as well as some of just your initial reluctance to go there. Being a medical professional going into that hospital experience, I mean, how did that impact your experience in the hospital, already speaking the language of doctors and just having just that little more background knowledge that a lot of folks don't have?
I mean, it was humbling in a way. I think just sort of knowing, how long something would take, what would likely be the next steps, what they would do with my diet and, other things like that were sort of already known. So there was some comfort in that. In another sense, it was kind of, frankly embarrassing. Like I was telling them, hey guys, it's now, I don't know, 4 or 5 in the afternoon. I still haven't peed this morning. So as a urologist, I'm calculating, how much urine output I've probably made thus far, and talking about since the night before, because frankly, taking a piss was not, not on the forefront of my thoughts. And, so once I kind of settled down a little bit, then I kind of went into survival mode, and I was like, hey, there are basic things that, a person needs to do. And I haven't done some of them. So, then it kind of, it's just kind of like a complete state of disbelief, almost like denial also, like, this is still not happening. How is this happening? This can't be happening. This shouldn't be happening to me. And that's kind of what was going through my head for most of the time, at least initially.
So do you then think, obviously raising concerns about not having peed is certainly an important thing that a lot of people wouldn't even think about.
Right.
Do you think then having that additional knowledge then helped?
I don't know. It kind of helped me just for peace of mind, and at least to kind of throw some red flags out to the people taking care of me, mostly at that time, like the nurses and the technicians and things, just trying to put the bug in their ear, saying, hey, this is going to be a problem if we don't try to handle it now. The great irony in all of this is that ultimately, I did need a urinary catheter, which is kind of, in hindsight, very funny to me because, I've placed thousands of catheters, the difficult Foley catheterization consult. That's like, urologists get called for that all the time. Here I was about to have a catheter, ultimately got it. That was painful at the time, but in a way, I'm glad that happened to me, because now I can actually, tell patients without in essence, lying to them how a catheter actually feels,
Mm-hmm. So do you think this experience has made you a better doctor?
Absolutely. So right now, I'm doing, I guess what you would call like clinical urology. So just seeing patients in the office, doing very minor medical procedures. I'm not back yet to the point where I can do autonomous, surgeries and things like that in the operating room. So just kind of knowing what someone, a patient is going through, whether it's stroke related or not, and really being able to identify with, sort of the things going on inside their hearts and minds, has definitely helped me. If you look at the silver lining of this thing, I think it's just definitely made me a better person, better doctor.
And that's what we got to do. We have these experiences that are thrust upon us, and we've got to, there's definitely horrible stuff that happens, but there's good stuff too that we have to be able to extract from that so we can move forward with our lives in whatever form they are going to take. After your initial stroke, then, what deficits were you left with? I mean, you had the balance challenges.
Oh yeah.
And what other challenges did you have as a result of the stroke?
Yeah, so I still have issues with balance. Your cerebellum is kind of like your great, balancer. A lot of people can relate to this just from, drinking alcohol and things like that. Those things, will impair your cerebellar activity, and you can tell, that you would be off balance. And so this was something, I kind of quickly, realized or remembered from medical school was that, generally when we think of strokes, a lot of them happen in the cerebrum, kind of the main thinking brain. And we're kind of cross-wired. So, those deficits affect, the contralateral side. So if you had a right-sided stroke, you would generally have left-sided weakness and things like that. With a cerebellar stroke, it's all ipsilateral, same side. And so my left side basically is kind of the whole thing affected. So the cerebellum, despite being important for balance, it's also, it also controls your fine motor skills and your ability to coordinate your movements in space. And so, and when you have an inability to do that, they call it ataxia. And so yes, I have an ataxic gait. I walk funny. I have ataxic movements of my left hand. So they're not refined. They kind of look like, if you've ever stuck your hand out of a car window when you're driving 60 miles down the highway and you kind of feel that wavy motion. That's kind of like what my left arm and hand feel like most of the time. Things like picking up a dime off of a kitchen table or something like that. Very difficult. And initially, my vision was severely affected. Your cerebellum coordinates eye movements, among other things. And so I had to do quite a bit of therapy just to get my eyes to function correctly again. They put me in these things called prism glasses. If you've never seen them, they're kind of like these Coke bottle lenses that they put over your face. It's kind of to orient your horizon, like when you're walking and moving towards something. And I remember being in therapy, and they said, "Oh, you have your prism glasses on." I said, "Yeah." And one of the therapists asked, "Do they work?" I said, "Absolutely, they work. No one hits on me anymore." They're hilarious looking, but But yeah, at any rate, those were kind of the main things affected. I think the thing that I learned was that the cerebellum as a part of the brain is kind of like one of the newer frontiers in neuroscience research. And there's so much of the cerebellum that's just not really known, in terms of its function and physiology. So I'm kind of learning more as I go.
Well, I think what's one of the things that's really interesting when we talk about the brain, a lot of times people, I think that's just our own human arrogance. We get all caught up in what the cerebrum does, the main parts of the brain with all the big loops and valleys that we typically think of as the brain. But it's the evolutionarily older parts of the brain, the cerebellum and the medulla or brainstem before that sort of develops much further back in the evolution of the species. And those are the parts that, other animals share. And as you move further up the evolutionary chain to humans, you get much more complex and newer brain structures. But the basics of balance and breathing and eyesight and motion and keeping the heart beating, that's all happening in those older, more basic parts of the brain that we just don't think about.
Exactly. We think of the cerebellum as kind of like, it's kind of like your autoplay setting for, I guess you could call it like muscle memory or something like that, where you have, so it's, if you think of it as kind of like a tape deck or something like that, you're saying like play, play slow walk or something like that. And your butt, you don't really have to think about walking, cause your cerebellum more or less automates that. Now I have to consciously think, okay, move my left foot forward, put so much pressure, on the ball of my foot, that sort of thing. Whereas before, it's just natural. You don't think about it at all.
It's all of those macros, all of those scripts, those procedures the body just knows how to execute.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like a basic operating system. When it's gone, when it's affected, then you sort of have to come up with other ways to achieve the same result.
My stroke was in my basal ganglia. And
oh, wow.
what I often say is that basal ganglia is the part of the brain that basically stores the drivers for my internal operating system.
Right.
So right now the drivers got wiped out. So I'm trying to run the left side of my body with the equivalent of a generic VGA driver and not really taking advantage of what I can do with my video card.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's another basic part of the brain that connects very closely with the cerebellum and all that other stuff. The deeper you go inside the brain, the more fundamental the functions.
Yeah, I totally agree.
What is your favorite memory from your time in rehab?
Let's see. I've done a few different rehabs. Actually, I have a good answer to that because I was in the ICU for 26 days. I went to a step-down hospital for, I think, maybe another 22, maybe 30 days, something like that. And I was essentially isolated for a long time. But when I was at the inpatient rehab area, oddly enough, one of my old beer drinking buddies was one of the physical therapists that took on my case. And he was great. He got me back to at least walking with a walker. I couldn't walk at all, so that was a huge milestone. And he just kind of told me flat out, he said, look, there's not really any stroke specific, rehab centers in New Mexico. You may want to look at Colorado or Texas, kind of neighboring states. And so my wife had family in the Dallas area that, offered to house us, while I did a therapy program. And so I ultimately went to Baylor Scott and White in the Dallas area and did a month of therapy there afterwards. So, of course, they did a lot of good work, and, I definitely commend them for that. But my favorite memory was playing Pictionary with a bunch of stroke rehab patients. And so it was like our group, our group therapy thing. And one of the guys on our team, he had an expressive aphasia. And so, we were all playing Pictionary. Our team was getting killed. and he had to go up and draw butterfly. That was his prompt. And so he got up there and he drew 2 circles, on top of each other. The sand is running out of the little timer and everything. And we're screaming at him. We're like, Bill, keep drawing. And he says, he goes, I can see it, but I can't draw it, so he had literally could not, express what he was thinking. And we're all shouting out, basketball, bowling ball, ant, and finally the time runs out and we lose. And, it was just kind of a laugh riot going on in there, because afterwards, we're all kind of thinking, wings would have been helpful, not to make fun of it or anything, but it was just that it was a lot of fun, it was, the mood was fairly somber, we had to eat in isolation because of COVID and everything. We're all wearing masks. And so, when we did get to do group activities, it was a total blast.
And again, that's what you do. You laugh or you cry. You got to pick which one you want to go to.
Right.
I also think that's a really interesting commentary on aphasia, in that, when we talk about aphasia as a communication challenge, it's not just about words and making words. There's so much along that language and communication chain that can break. And in this case, it wasn't about saying words. It was about, making that connection to actually to see wings in your mind and then to actually draw wings.
Right. Yeah. And I think he just, at that time, he just lacked that ability, but that's what I think was really great about, some of the group therapy sessions was that you're kind of put in these, I wouldn't say high stress environments, but you're just kind of asking, your brain to do some things that maybe it normally would not, if you were just alone.
Yeah, exactly. I think, that is a great point on that. And I think the other thing that's really valuable there too is you talk about sort of the value of that cohort, of having those other people in that community. And that's why one of the reasons why it's so valuable to, as the world opens up again, to get out to stroke support groups in your area if they are there and if they are available, because just getting out in that community, it can just be awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm learning right now that's something that was missing in my life. At first, you're kind of saying, well, I have all of these goals, I need to hit, I need to be able to walk again. I need to be able to think correctly or speak correctly and do all these things. But then once you kind of achieve, a new baseline or a new level of fundamentals, it's time to move on to, you have to be in a community. I think, a community of fellow stroke survivors is essential. You have to put your thoughts and everything into action. And, without a group like that, then, you may kind of leave yourself behind.
So, let's see. One of the other things I wanted to, that I am just super curious about too, is how does one go ahead and choose a career as a urologist to begin with? I mean, at what point in the process do you think, I want to study the penis?
So yeah, that's funny you say that. All my, that's what my, my friends get hung up on, right? Because it's hilarious to them, but. Urology is kind of one of those fields where you get to do a little bit of everything. I grew up in a cattle ranching family, and we were always building and fixing things and doing things with our hands. And so I knew in medical school that I wanted to do surgery, just, some kind of surgical area. What I liked about urology is it is cool in the sense that you get to relate with other men on a very personal level, a very vulnerable level. You do a lot of different things on a daily basis. I mean, you may see people in the clinic. You may go blast a bunch of kidney stones with a laser. You may do a big major
Okay, well, once you talk about blasting things with a laser, I'm in.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of so you're shooting things with lasers. You're doing sometimes big big wild cancer surgeries, like kidney and prostate surgeries. We get to work with a robot.
Oh,
So it's like,
cool.
yeah, so it's like, it's like sci-fi, and it's quite a bit of fun. And yeah, I think a lot of urologists, are very proficient and skilled, but they also have, I think, some level of humility, and can crack a joke every now and then, especially given the nature of their field. So it's a good environment, and it's just I think it kind of chose me rather than me thinking, oh, I'm definitely going to be a urologist. So it's just kind of fit my personality mold, I think.
So, I mean, what do you wish more people knew about the field?
It's highly varied. There's lots of different things we do. When you talk about urology, there's cancer surgeries going from basically from your adrenal glands all the way down to your, prostate and urethra, and the genitals, right? Testicular cancer, prostate cancer, kidney cancer, bladder cancer. There's quite a lot going on, with the urinary and reproductive tract. So it's also fun in that you still get to be a doctor. You still get to, think about physiology, pathophysiology, things like adrenal disorders and other things like that. So you're using your brain. You're going back to, high school chemistry with a lot of the kidney stone, prevention and treatment. And it's just kind of all over the map. And I think it works really well for someone like me that has, pretty terrible, ADD.
So in your practice and as you've worked with patients, what do you think is something that you really wish more men knew about their urological health, or things that that so many men are just doing wrong or not thinking about that they absolutely should be doing?
Well, I think if you notice a problem, acknowledge it. There are doctors, specific to these issues. Even though sometimes the nature of it may be a little bit embarrassing, we're not embarrassed. We see it every day. There should be no, embarrassment. Just be vulnerable and straightforward from the get-go, and things will go well from there. A lot of times people wait, and I think it's some kind of like either embarrassment or denial. And sometimes you'll see folks come in with a testicular mass, sometimes a year later after they recognized it, and you're going, I wish you would have come in, 8 months ago. But then you think about it, would I myself do that? Yeah, I guess so. But how did I react with that stroke? I brushed it off. I completely thought nothing wrong was, that severe was going on. So denial's a really powerful thing. I would just say be honest with yourself and just be honest with others. I think that'll save you a lot of heartache in the end.
That's good guidance for so many things in life.
Oh, yeah.
So outside of just living, the specifics of stroke and specifics of professional life, you've also been doing some amazing painting. So, I mean, and we're not talking about houses here. We're talking about art style painting. So, I mean, what role does painting and art now have in your life?
It's a huge role. During COVID, I would say sometime in the summer of 2020, I decided I was going to take up palette knife painting. Not really had any formal training or anything like that before, but I decided I'm going to get a new hobby, and so I kind of taught myself how to do that on YouTube University, and really enjoyed it. I used to paint with brushes and acrylics and things like that when I was a kid. Every now and again, there was enough sort of tedium in my life. I said I want to do something more on kind of a macro scale, and so I said I'm going to do palette knife painting. So I started doing it. Then I realized I really enjoyed it, and then finally, maybe after 50 paintings or so, I finally started getting proficient at it, and began selling some of my artwork. when I had after I had the stroke and I was doing, therapy for 6-7 hours a day, in Dallas, and I had nothing to do in the evenings, besides my stroke homework, I was painting. I think at the time it just gave me an incredible sense of, validation. I didn't know what my future held. I didn't know if I was going to be able to return to a job. I had no way of creating anything really, or selling anything. Nothing that gave me kind of like a sense of true validation or worth. And so I started doing that, and sold a lot of paintings immediately after my stroke. Mostly because I think people felt sorry for me, but eventually, I started getting other buyers, besides just family and friends, and so, it was a really powerful thing for me. It's fun for me to do. It was something I could do with my right hand, and really just enjoy it. And I'm still doing it all the time.
There's a lot of stuff that's really interesting in there. First of all, I think a lot of folks out there don't necessarily associate painting in youth with working on a ranch in Texas. So I think that alone is really interesting for folks who haven't encountered the whole, entire genre of Western art. Not that that's necessarily what you're doing.
Yeah.
But there is definitely a role there. So after your stroke, did you see any, obviously your physical abilities have an impact on what you're able to put onto the canvas, but did your artistic sense change following your stroke, or the types of things you wanted to paint, or your style?
So I think it did. I don't, actually, I think it changed for the better. I just, I don't know. In some way, the creative process just got better, and I can't really put my finger on why, but yeah. So I think ultimately things just got better. Maybe it was because I was kind of devoting all my newfound energy into that, but I think it just changed for the better. I think it was all of a sudden it was like something that I had to do instead of something that I just could do. And it was just ultimately a very good thing for me. While I was painting, and I was keeping in touch with more friends and family in Dallas, one of my co-residents told me, we would talk about things that happened in the hospital, things with the strokes, me getting catheterized, me having, multiple brain surgeries and almost dying and this and that. And he liked some of the stories, and he said, you should really write these down. And I said, I don't know, a lot of these things I don't really want to remember. He said, no, you should do it. I think you'll appreciate this later in life. And so ultimately I said, I'll write these things down. I do need to practice my typing. I can no longer type with my left hand. And so, I'll just write these things down for the sake of just writing, and just trying to recuperate, make my left hand do what I need it to do. Because, typing's a pretty big part of being a doctor, unfortunately. So, but yeah, so I started that, and then the writing kind of took on a life of its own, and ultimately, the writing started coming from the standpoint of, how can I help other stroke survivors? How can I show other people, what it is we go through, and what are the things we're thinking, and what are the things that, are happening to us on a day-to-day basis, especially in recovery. And so yeah, it just kind of took on a life of its own, and I ultimately produced a manuscript. I sent it to my good friend's dad, who is he's a brilliant writer, and had written a very successful children's book in Texas. But I said, I'm thinking about self-publishing this thing because it's important to me. And he said, no, you shouldn't do that. He said, this is too good to self-publish. He said, you need to actually find a real outfit, a real publisher, and and get this thing out there. And so, a few months later, I contacted a bunch of publishers, and one finally accepted me, and that's when the book, the Stroke Artist, came to be.
And I gotta say, my inner 13-year-old is utterly delighted that a urologist has named their memoir "The Stroke Artist."
How so?
Well, pairing in the art aspect, the stroke itself, and of course the masturbatory overtones of the word stroke.
Yeah.
A few people have actually, when told the name of the podcast, that's their first thought is that it's about masturbation, and it's like, that the brain logo doesn't really line up with that. But hey, whatever gets you to listen, maybe you'll learn something.
Yeah, exactly. That's funny. Yeah, no, I think I kind of when choosing the title, I kind of think I was thinking about being a choke artist. Like I was almost to, what the promised land, as they say, sort of this fictional idea of a happy ending, I guess. But I fell short in a sense, just from, having had a stroke. I said, well, and it's also like, artist, art, I kind of put the two together and said, well, I'll just call it that.
And the stroke of the palette knife as well.
Exactly. And
it works on so many levels.
Yeah, I think it's hilarious that you just had to point that out to a urologist, because usually we kind of have some of the dirtiest minds, but yeah, I'm just now in on the joke.
So as you were then writing the book, what was your writing process like? Were you just remembering these anecdotes and writing them down, or how did you go ahead and produce this draft? And let's keep in mind, all at the point that we're talking now, it's spring of 2022. So we are not even 18 months out from this, where you've had the stroke, gone into the rehab, gone to Dallas, picked up painting again, turned into a professional painter, gotten back into the clinic, and written a book in the middle of this process as well.
Yeah, it's just, it's, when you have something like that happen to you, your mind kind of goes to the Shawshank Redemption quote, you either get busy living or you get busy dying. And so that's, that was kind of my mantra, for a little while. And you are putting in, very hard work trying to make your brain, that's especially, I don't have, a full brain, I'm not playing with a full deck, as they say. A piece of it was removed. So, I kind of said, look, I'm going to make the most of this, and, I don't care what happens. And you have some downtime, I think, in some of this, in the therapy and other things. You're not, planning on major surgeries and doing all these things. So you do have this newfound, I feel like, downtime that, and for me, it's like, why am I not utilizing this? I should be utilizing this time. And so I just, I kind of put my heart and soul into these things, and just went with that.
What advice would you then have for other survivors who are thinking, maybe I should write a book?
I think it's definitely a powerful tool. I think it can help on so many levels. There's a lot of practical things that it helps with. It's very good for, I guess, cognitive training. You're scanning the letters. You're trying to edit and do things like that. Those are very powerful cognitive processes. You're using your fine motor skills like typing and things like that. You're remembering these things, and sometimes it's frankly very painful to remember some of these things that happen. But it's amazing how quickly our brain, forgets some of these memories, and maybe to protect us, maybe to repress some of these memories and things like that. So, it's helpful in the sense that it's something you can go back and refer to and be like, oh, I remember that, or I remember that person. They were, they were really, really helpful to me. They were really nice. And, so I think, I think it's a powerful thing. And, we need as many perspectives as we can get on, on stroke. The other advice I would say, and it's kind of like do as I say, not as I do, not as I do, was that find a community, find a community of fellow stroke survivors. I don't know, I'm 18 months out, but I feel like I'm kind of late in the game to that, and I finally have found a community. It's probably the smartest thing I've done in a long time. It's very easy to feel comfortable with yourself and kind of, isolate and sort of say, well, I've done as good as I can do. But if you lose, your external motivators, then, you may be missing the bus. And so I'm fully realizing that now, and I'm getting involved in stroke communities, and it's the greatest decision I've made.
That's fantastic. And I will say that I talk with a lot of survivors, and it may be 2, 3, 4, 5 years before they start getting involved with the communities and with other survivors. So you're not late to the game from that perspective. A lot of times, stroke is a very isolating condition. A lot of folks, may not be able to leave their homes, or maybe because of their specific deficits, or because they can't drive, or because of sensory overload conditions. And there's all sorts of different reasons that encourage people to stay home, plus the impact of post-stroke depression as a separate beast altogether impacts that. Plus, so many people, and especially younger stroke survivors, don't know that there are other younger stroke survivors out there. And I think the growth of social media and the stroke survivor hashtags has been just super powerful in just letting people know that there is this entire world of people available online. And if there's a lot of people available online, you know what? There's also a lot of people available in your community. And as COVID when COVID ultimately relents, get out there and go see them.
Right. Yeah. And that's how I found my community was through social media, primarily on Instagram. But before that, I really had no idea that it existed. And so yeah, glad the opportunity presented itself.
Absolutely. And yeah, you didn't know this existed even when you were every day going to a hospital, which probably had some flyers up somewhere or other about a local stroke support community. But we don't know about this stuff until it actually connects with us for some reason.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You kind of have to have that piece of acceptance before you want to move forward with something. I think initially it's just information overload, where it's like, okay, I got to get my hand better. I got to walk. I got to do these worksheets so my brain functions a little better. I got to do this. I got to do that. And you're kind of just drinking from the fire hose, and things like support groups and community are likely not at the forefront, of your thoughts. But, ultimately I think it's just it's really invaluable, because it's great to, read books and do those kinds of things about stroke. But if you never actually get out there and have a sense of community and connection, then, it's kind of like you're almost stuck. No one's out there pushing you to be better. No one's asking you to draw that butterfly in Pictionary.
And that brings us to our hack of the week. But first, let's talk about sponsor Modus Nova. This week, I'm especially pleased to have the Modus hand in my home. I just got my latest round of Dysport, which is a Botox alternative, and now need to increase the exercises I do to get maximum benefit from my treatment. The Modus hand helps me do just that. It's an AI-controlled, air-powered robotic exoskeleton that I wear on my arm. It helps me move my wrist as I play video games, and as I get better, it will start to resist my movement to help me get the most out of my exercise. The whole point of it, though, is to help me get the repetitions that I need to drive my recovery and ultimately get my hand back. To find out if Modus Nova can help you recover the use of a stroke-affected limb, Visit strokecast.com/Modus Nova. Use promo code STROKECAST for 10% off your first month. And now back to our hack of the week.
I think some other powerful. One of the books I'm reading right now, Atomic Habits, is kind of saying, it's not about just one day you go out and you make a drastic change. It's like, how about one day your goal is just, try to do, one task, 1% better than you did the day before, or something like that. You don't need to put this huge burden of massive improvement just on yourself. It's all about, think small. Think about just small improvements, and maybe do that every day, and then in a year, if you look at if you do the math on that, that's like 37 times better than you started. So it's not. I don't think it's about making these massive changes. Just because that's daunting. So I'd just say kind of start small. Give yourself some small, very practical goals or habits, if you will, and then see what happens. It's sort of, the motivation follows the action. So it's just about making that first little action.
That's great. I'm a big believer in that. It's why I end every episode with the line, "Don't get best, get better." Because all you got to do is just get a little bit better every day.
Yeah,
and that's all you have to do. So as you look over this whole experience, ultimately with that stroke, was it a blessing or a curse?
It was a blessing. I wouldn't say it's a curse. Of course it's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing. It's affecting this career that I had spent, to be honest, like $200,000 in student loans, and think about all the time. It's essentially 9 years to just become a urologist without any fellowship training or anything. So you invest all of this time, and it's just one day it's just completely taken from you. So it seems you want to say life's unfair and this and that, but I think having the stroke just really taught me how to live now. It's like, what was I living for before? I was, there's some things I was living for other people. I was helping a lot of people. Was I necessarily, taking care of myself, or was I community oriented and connected to a large group of people? No. And so, I think this stroke just kind of, made me realize, like, hey, there's a whole world out there. You should be a part of it. You can't just sort of isolate and kind of be your own island, And so yeah, ultimately, I think it's a blessing.
Well, Bevan, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. And if folks want to know more about you and what you're up to, where should they go?
So yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Bevan Choate. I'm also sort of a consolidation of my art, and the book is on The Stroke Artist, all one word, .myshopify.com, and you can check me out there.
Well, fantastic. And we're going to have all of those links in the show notes as well, so folks can just pull them up in their app or go to the website for the Strokecast and find all of those links right there. Again, thank you so much for joining us. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Likewise, Bill. I appreciate it, and thanks for having me on, and thanks for the powerful questions.
Sponsor Like Minded can be a great way to connect with other members of the community. Like Minded is a nonprofit membership program that helps you live your best post-stroke life. Like Minded offers classes on everything from hand exercises to telling your story. The virtual classes are led by survivors, by physical therapists, occupational therapists, doctors, and more. They're held throughout the week, but if you can't attend the one you want, that's not a problem because members get access to the recorded version of the sessions, so you can still catch up and connect. If you have a specific question, reach out through the private text messaging group that's also part of the program. Get the support you need and deserve to live your best post-stroke life. To find out if Like-Minded is right for you, visit strokecast.com/like-minded. Use promo code STROKECAST to save 20% on your first month. I really liked Bevan's description of ataxia. I can still remember that feeling of sticking my hand out the car window on the Belt Parkway or the Grand Central Parkway on those rare occasions that traffic was moving quickly, so never on the Long Island Expressway, and grabbing a hearty handful of New York City air and pushing back. And I eventually reached a sort of bouncy truce with the air pressure. And then we would take an exit and it would all be over. But it is a really nice visual for explaining just that physical sensation. I also liked learning about Bevan's work. I mean, the field of urology is about so much more than just, the penis and male genitalia. And that's something we don't really think about or talk about enough. There is so much connected and going on in there, and into the kidneys and the adrenals and just everything else that is all part of this system that is just so important and often so neglected. What I continue to be amazed at, though, is just how much stuff Bevan has accomplished since his stroke at the end of 2020. And I'm recording this right now in June of 2022. So it's really not that long since his stroke. I mean, just about 18 months or so. Since then, he's done his multiple stints in rehab, had his brain surgeries, become a professional painter selling his work, returned to work as a doctor, and has managed to publish a book. And he's still living with the impacts of his stroke. I really applaud Bevan for all that he's accomplished. And at the same time, I'd encourage you to remember that you can learn from stories like his, and you can take inspiration and ideas from them and see that things can be possible. At the same time, though, don't compare yourself to Bevan, or to me, or to anyone else. Because as C.S. Lewis, author of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and the Screwtape Letters, and a bunch of other things, has said, comparison is the thief of joy. I am not Bevan. Bevan and I had different strokes, recoveries, backgrounds, desires, and goals. We are on very different paths. But one path is not better or worse or deserving of shame or deserving of more praise than the other. Throughout this life and recovery, we all walk our own path. And those paths may overlap with others' paths, and there may be times that we can walk together, but ultimately, we are still on our own bespoke or custom journey. Comparing our place in our journey to someone else's place in their own bespoke or custom journey isn't going to help us progress on our own. So learn from others' journeys. Absolutely. Definitely do that. But remember that ultimately, you are going to walk your own path, and you're going to create your own journey and have your own amazing life. So be sure to check out Bevan's art or to find his book. You can do that over at strokecast.com/Bevan, Bevan. And if you enjoyed this episode, please tell someone else about it. You can give them the link directly to it at strokecast.com/Bevan so that they can enjoy it too. Because if you enjoyed it, I imagine people you know, your friends, your family, the people you like to spend time with, may also enjoy it as well. So that is strokecast.com/Bevan. Be sure to sign up for the free Strokecast email newsletter at strokecast.com/news. And of course, as always, don't get best. Get better. Thanks a lot. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'll talk to you soon.
The Strokecast, Bill Monroe, and Bill's guests provide general information and entertainment, not medical advice. Please do not make any changes to your treatment plan or the execution of your treatment plan without first consulting your personal doctor or medical team. The Strokecast is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.